Hello everybody, and thank you for tuning in to this video explanation of our Intern Keys rubric and the emphasized standards for Practicum 1. In your curriculum course, you've probably already learned about what Intern Keys is and how it mirrors the TEKS assessment used in the public school system. In your undergraduate program, different courses and field placements emphasize different standards to help you understand them all and to help you show evidence of mastering them. In Practicum 1, our emphasized standards are 1, 7, 9, and 10. And then in your co-requisite class, your curriculum course, the emphasized standard is 2, which is the planning standard. What I've noticed over the years as I've worked with Practicum 1 teacher candidates is that they have a general sense of what each standard is about, but they don't quite get what they should do in the classroom to meet each standard. Here is the Intern Keys rubric itself, and I will scroll down so you can see that each page explains a different standard. You will see that underneath the explanation of the standard itself, the rubric lists different performance indicators, and these are more specific explanations of what a teacher might do in the classroom to show that he or she can meet the standard. Still, I get the feeling that some teacher candidates, especially those early in their programs, might need a bit more help understanding what these performance indicators might look like in an internship setting. So I have created this document, which you have access to in our Folio e-classroom, that outlines the performance indicators under each standard, and then some specific actions, statements, choices, and behaviors that a teacher would exhibit to show that he or she has addressed the standard. This document will help you decide what you can do during your internship to show your mastery of our emphasized standards in Practicum 1. Let's look at Standard 1, and as we go over it, I hope you'll better understand what the Intern Keys rubric is trying to communicate to you. Standard 1 has to do with professional knowledge. That refers to your knowledge of your subject matter as well as your knowledge of how to teach that subject matter to your students at a particular grade level. It refers to your ability to demonstrate to your students why the subject matter is important, how it builds on what students already know, and how the students will use these concepts later in school and in the real world. On the left column, you have the performance indicators as listed in the Intern Keys rubric. They are explained using academic language, and usually, but not always, they use measurable, observable verbs. Then in the right column, I have provided some examples of what teachers might do in the classroom to demonstrate those performance indicators. So what would I look for in an observation? Well, certainly I will look for evidence that shows you know your subject matter. That's noted in the fourth performance indicator. What concepts are you teaching, and are you explaining them correctly? How are you doing that? And are you using the appropriate resources to help students understand those concepts? Also, I would look for evidence that you've aligned your instruction to Georgia standards as well as to measurable learning objectives and activities. That's the first performance indicator for this standard. I would look for the ways that you communicate that alignment somewhere in the lesson. A lot of teachers post the standards somewhere in the classroom, usually on the whiteboard. That's an excellent start. I've seen other teachers instruct their students to recite each day's standard. If you want to do that, knock yourself out. And if your clinical supervisor wants you to read a Georgia standard aloud, then certainly do. But many teacher candidates believe that simply posting standards in the room or reciting them meets Standard 1, and those teacher candidates are mistaken. Think about it this way. I doubt any seventh grader really cares about the Georgia Standards of Excellence per se. What a seventh grader cares about is the answer to the question, why do I have to learn this? It's your job as the teacher to help the students understand the purpose of the lesson and what the standard is saying about the lesson's purpose and how meeting that purpose will benefit them in the long run. If you look at the performance indicators in the left column, they all have to do with helping the students understand the answer to that question they always ask. So you would be smart to spend a few minutes of your instruction talking about what that standard really means. Can students express it in their own words? What concepts have they already learned to help them meet the day's purpose? And how will they use those concepts in everyday life, even outside of school? If you help students make those connections, then you've demonstrated several performance indicators listed under Standard 1. At the bottom of this page, you'll see 3 levels of performance: emerging, developing, and proficient. The Intern Keys rubric explains these levels in terms of how consistent a teacher demonstrates these skills. To be proficient, a teacher would demonstrate these behaviors consistently. To be developing, a teacher would demonstrate them, but only inconsistently. And to be emerging, a teacher would be just beginning to demonstrate these behaviors. Unfortunately, the state rubric does not define the term consistent. Does that mean every time? Most times? How many of these behaviors would a teacher need to demonstrate consistently? That part of the evaluation is under much discussion among supervisors. So for my purposes in evaluating you in this practicum, I've explained how I define consistency and what it would take to be evaluated at those different levels. Keep in mind that being consistent with these behaviors comes with practice, so don't feel as though you must be proficient with all standards upon your first demonstration. It would be unreasonable and unrealistic for me or you to expect that. Instead, it would be reasonable and realistic for me to expect you to have reached the developing level for these 4 standards by the end of the semester. If you get evaluated at emerging levels for some standards, don't think of that evaluation as revealing flaws in your instruction. Think of that as an opportunity to continue demonstrating these performance indicators. So that's the goal for this document, and the subsequent pages offer similar information just for the other standards. I'm not going to read these performance indicators and their examples in this video. You can do that on your own, but for the remaining 3 standards, I'll just offer you a general overview of what I might look for in a teacher observation. Standard 7, Positive Learning Environment, assesses how well you keep your classroom orderly and safe. To what extent do you promote a climate of respect in your classroom? Many teacher candidates perceive this standard to be the classroom management standard, and in part it is, but this standard also assesses how you maintain a professional, cordial, productive relationship with your students so that they can learn. Under this standard, I would observe not only your oral communications, but also your written communications and your nonverbal communications. I would observe how carefully you listen to students, how you manage classroom conversations so that everyone has a voice. I would observe your seating arrangement and where you keep materials so that they're readily available. I would observe how well and how often you use students' names and how you keep them on track. I offered many examples in this right-hand column. Time won't permit me to go through all of these examples in this video, but I have a feeling that you will demonstrate a number of these behaviors during your teaching demonstrations. Standard 9, Professionalism, is a standard that you can address during instruction and also during your non-teaching moments. For instance, under this standard, you must demonstrate your punctuality and reliable attendance, and you would reflect on your professional development and set goals for future learning. but as you teach, I can also look for evidence of your professionalism. Of course, I will examine your attire and your grooming and whether you are wearing your Georgia Southern name tag. I will observe how well you collaborate with your clinical supervisor and with other professionals in the classroom. I will observe how you handle any student questions or comments that might be irrelevant to the lesson. Students often want to ask you for personal information, for instance, so how you handle those questions would demonstrate your professionalism. And standard 10 has to do with your communication skills. Again, you can demonstrate these during instruction and also during your non-teaching moments. So whenever you communicate in writing or orally with me or with your clinical supervisor or with other school personnel, you would be addressing standard 10. But you also use your communication skills when you're teaching. Your communication extends into some other standards as well. You use your communication skills when you promote a positive learning environment and when you demonstrate your professionalism. But under this standard, I will also observe, for instance, how accurately you use the language. Even if you are not an English teacher, I would expect you to use correct grammar and diction. And I would expect you to choose your words to best suit the developmental levels of your students. How carefully have you proofread your PowerPoint slides and other written instructional materials? When you give oral instructions, do you back them up with written instructions? And are those written instructions clear? Also, have you been selective about your communications to maintain student privacy when warranted? All of those behaviors would indicate your ability to meet standard 10. So please review this document several times over the term. In Folio, it's in the Important Documents folder, and you can also access this document through the Week 2 materials. This document might help you gauge your own teaching growth and help you complete your weekly self-assessments. And at the same time, if you have any questions about these performance indicators or the examples of how you could demonstrate them, or if you have any questions about the Intern Keys rubric or any expectations of you this semester, please reach out to me. I'll be glad to answer your questions. Thank you.